The divorce papers sat on Lisa's kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. And when she opened them to page 17, her face went white as the hospital sheets I'd slept on for months. $340,000 in medical debt, all legally transferred to her name. She looked up at me standing in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. While Mark cowered behind her, wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, my former best friend had the decency to look ashamed, but Lisa? She had the audacity to ask how I could do this to her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, I was David Chen, a 32-year-old software developer living what I thought was the perfect life in Austin, Texas. Lisa and I had been married for 4 years, living in our dream house in Cedar Park with plans to start a family. I worked remotely for a tech startup. She handled marketing for the prestigious Riverside Country Club, and weekends were spent hiking around Lake Travis or checking out the live music scene downtown. Everything felt solid, predictable, safe. The lump appeared on a Tuesday morning while I was getting dressed for a client presentation. At first, I dismissed it as stress manifesting physically. The startup was going through a crucial funding round, and I'd been pulling 8 days coding our new platform. But when Lisa noticed me touching my neck during dinner, her marketing-trained eye for detail kicked in. "Babe, you keep rubbing that spot. Does it hurt?" she asked, setting down her fork of pad thai from our favorite place on South Lamar. I shrugged it off, but she insisted I get it checked. Looking back, that concern felt genuine. The woman who would later destroy me actually drove me to that first doctor's appointment. Holding my hand in the waiting room at St. Mary's Medical Center, while we both pretended everything would be fine, Dr. Sarah Williams delivered the news with the kind of practiced gentleness that comes from years of shattering lives. Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3, aggressive but treatable. The words hit like a physical blow, and I remember Lisa's grip on my hand tightening so hard, her wedding ring left an indent in my finger. She cried harder than I did that day. The treatment plan was brutal but straightforward. 6 months. Intensive chemotherapy, radiation, and enough medical procedures to bankrupt a small country. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs would be staggering. Dr. Williams connected us with James Park, a financial advisor who specialized in medical debt management, and the numbers he showed us were terrifying. We're looking at roughly $300,000 minimum. James explained in his downtown office, his voice matter. Fact, despite the life-altering figure. Insurance covers about 60% after deductibles. The rest falls on you. Lisa squeezed my shoulder from behind the chair where I sat, stunned. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "We have savings, and the house has equity. We'll get through this together." Those words felt like a lifeline in the face of fighting. For my life, knowing she was committed to fighting alongside me made the mountain feel climbable. We spent that evening on our back porch, planning how to restructure our finances, talking about me taking leave from work, or potentially picking up freelance projects to supplement her income. "Whatever it takes," she said, curled up against me on the porch swing we'd installed the previous spring. "You focus on getting better, I'll handle everything else." The first month of treatment was a special kind of hell that no one prepares you for. The chemotherapy didn't just attack the cancer. It attacked everything. My energy disappeared first, then my appetite. Then chunks of my hair started falling out in the shower. Lisa documented it all, taking pictures of my progress, researching dietary supplements, and turning our guest room into a recovery sanctuary complete with blackout curtains and a mini fridge stocked with anti-nausea medication. She drove me to every appointment during those early weeks, sitting through hours of 4 drips while working on her laptop, fielding calls from country club clients who needed last-minute event changes. I felt guilty watching her juggle her career with my crisis, but she insisted it was what marriage meant. "In sickness and in health, remember?" she'd say, brushing what remained of my hair back from my forehead. "This is the sickness part. We'll get to more health soon." The medical bills started arriving like a paper avalanche. Even with James's careful financial planning, the reality of cancer treatment costs was overwhelming. Co-pays for specialists, visits, prescription costs for medications insurance deemed experimental, facility fees that seemed designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering. Each envelope felt like another weight added to an already crushing load. Lisa handled all of it with an efficiency that amazed me. She set up payment plans, negotiated with billing departments, and somehow kept our household running while I spent most days too weak to get off the couch. When I apologized for becoming such a burden, she'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was being ridiculous. "You do the same for me," she always said. "This is what love looks like." By month 3, I was responding well to treatment. The tumors were shrinking, my energy was slowly returning, and Dr. Williams was cautiously optimistic about my prognosis. Lisa seemed happier too, more relaxed about leaving me alone for longer periods. She'd started staying late at the country club more frequently, explaining that several high-profile weddings were keeping her buried in details. "The Riverside summer season is insane," she'd say, coming home after 10 p.m. with takeout and apologies. "But the overtime pay is helping with the medical bills, so I can't complain." I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, my partner, the person who'd promised to stand by me through exactly this kind of crisis. When she started going to the gym more often, I was proud of her for maintaining her health while mine had temporarily crumbled. When she bought new clothes and started experimenting with different makeup looks, I figured she was treating herself to small luxuries after months of stress and sacrifice. The notification that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon. While I was napping on the couch between treatment sessions, my phone, which was charging on the coffee table, lit up with a text message clearly meant for Lisa's phone. The contact name was listed as M Trainer, which I assumed was her new personal trainer at the gym. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place as always. Mark." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling away. Couples shared gym trainers all the time. Maybe Mark was offering to work with both of us once I recovered. Maybe it was about nutrition planning or post-cancer fitness regimens. I set the phone aside and tried to go back to sleep, but that message had planted a seed of doubt that refused to stay buried. That evening, Lisa came home later than usual, her hair slightly messed and her lipstick gone. She blamed traffic and a last-minute client crisis, but something felt different. She seemed distracted during dinner, checking her phone more than usual and responding to texts with secretive little smiles. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, pushing around the soup she'd heated up for me. "Fine, just busy," she replied without looking up from her screen. "Nothing you need to worry about." But I was starting to worry about everything. The next morning, while Lisa was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before in our relationship. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I looked at her phone. The messages were all there, months of them, scrolling back to just 2 weeks after my diagnosis. Mark Rodriguez, my childhood friend who'd been best man at our wedding, the guy who'd helped me move furniture and borrowed my tools and shared countless barbecues in our backyard. It's the same Mark who'd hugged me tight when I told him about the cancer, promising he'd be there for whatever Lisa and I needed. "Thinking about you during David's treatment today? One message. Reed, you're being so strong. He's lucky to have you." Her response made my blood freeze. "I'm trying, but it's so hard pretending everything's okay. I just want to be with you." I scrolled further, my hand shaking as the chemo drugs made everything worse. The timestamp showed messages sent while I was literally lying in a hospital. Bed getting poison pumped into my veins to save my life. Photos exchanged, plans made. Declarations of love sent while she sat beside me holding my hand during 4 sessions. "David's asleep again." One message from Lisa read, sent just 3 days earlier. "Dr. Williams says the fatigue is normal, but I can't stand watching him fade away like this. Come over after 8. Mark's reply was immediate. "On my way. Hate seeing you suffer through this." The irony was suffocating. They'd positioned their affair as some kind of mercy mission, with Mark playing the role of emotional support for my poor, overwhelmed wife. Meanwhile, I was fighting for my life, completely unaware that my support system had turned into an elaborate deception. I took screenshots of everything before Lisa finished her shower, my fingers moving automatically while my brain struggled to process the betrayal. For months of lies, for months of fake sympathy and manufactured concern while they built their secret relationship on the foundation of my illness. When Lisa emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in the fluffy white robe I'd bought her for our anniversary, she found me sitting on the edge of our bed with her phone in my hands. The color drained from her face instantly. She started, but I held up my hand to stop her. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think. Mark's just been helping me cope with everything. You've been so sick, and I've been handling everything alone, and I just needed someone to talk to." "How long, Lisa?" She sat down on the opposite side of the bed, creating as much distance as possible between us. 2 months after your diagnosis. But David, you have to understand, I never meant for it to happen. You were in and out of the hospital constantly, and I was scared and lonely, and Mark was just there. The timeline was even worse than I'd calculated from the messages. She'd started the affair during my second round of chemotherapy, when I was at my weakest and most dependent on her support. Every day she'd driven me to treatment. Every night she'd held me while I threw up from the medication. Every moment. She'd assured me we were fighting this together. She'd been living a double life. "Where?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "What? Where did you meet him? Our house? Hotels? His apartment?" Lisa's silence was answer enough. They'd been using our home, the sanctuary she'd created for my recovery, as their meeting place. The guest room, where I'd spent countless hours too weak to climb the stairs, had been their backup location. When our bedroom felt too intimate for their betrayal, "I want you to leave," I said, standing up slowly. The fatigue from yesterday's treatment made every movement feel deliberate and heavy. "David, please, let's talk about this. I know I made mistakes, but I love you. I've been taking care of you. This whole time, doesn't that count for something?" The audacity of her statement hit me like a physical blow. She'd been taking care of me while actively deceiving me, using my illness as cover for her affair. Every act of caregiving had been tainted by her guilt and lies. "Taking care of me?" I repeated. "You've been fucking my best friend in our house while I'm fighting cancer. And you think driving me to doctor appointments makes up for that? Don't make this uglier than it has to be." "Uglier," I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Lisa, you've been carrying on an affair during my cancer treatment. There's no version of this that isn't ugly." She started crying then, the kind of manipulative tears I should have recognized years earlier. "I know I screwed up, but I can't lose you. Not now, not when you're getting better." Getting better. That was rich. My prognosis was good, but I had 2 more months of treatment ahead of me, followed by years of follow-up care and monitoring. The financial stress alone would take years to resolve. And now I'd have to navigate all of the while dealing with divorce proceedings and the complete destruction of my support system. "You already lost me," I said, walking toward the closet to grab some clothes. "You lost me the moment you decided Mark was more important than our marriage vows." "Where are you going?" "Tom's house. I'll be back tomorrow for more of my things." My brother Tom lived across town in a 1-bedroom apartment near the University of Texas campus. He was 5 years younger than me, still working on his graduate degree in engineering, but he'd been one of my most consistent supporters throughout the cancer battle. When I called him from the car, he didn't ask questions, just told me to come over. "What happened?" he asked when I arrived at his door, looking like death warmed over. I told him everything, watching his expression shift from confusion to disgust to rage. Tom had never been Lisa's biggest fan. He'd thought she was too focused on appearances and social status. But he'd kept his opinions to himself, out of respect for my marriage. "It's that piece of garbage," he said when I finished explaining. "And Mark, too. I never liked that guy. Always seemed fake to me." "I need to figure out what to do next," I said, collapsing onto his couch. "The treatment's not finished. The medical bills are piling up, and now I have to deal with divorce lawyers and splitting assets." Tom grabbed 2 beers from his fridge, handing me one even though alcohol was technically off limits during my treatment. "First things first, you need a lawyer. someone who specializes in complex divorces with significant debt involved. I can't afford a lawyer. Every penny we have is going to medical expenses. We'll figure it out. I have some savings, and maybe there are lawyers who work on contingency for this kind of situation. That night, lying on Tom's uncomfortable, pull-out couch, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process the complete upheaval of my life. 6 months ago, I'd been healthy, married, and financially stable. Now I was sick, betrayed, and facing financial ruin. The cancer had tried to kill my body, but Lisa and Mark had succeeded in killing everything else. The next morning I woke, up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from Lisa. The progression of her messages told a story of panic, denial, bargaining, and finally anger. She'd started with apologies and promises to end things with Mark, moved on to explanations about how the stress had driven her to make poor choices, finished with accusations that I was being unreasonable and cruel by abandoning her during such a difficult time. "You're throwing away our entire marriage over a mistake," her final message read. "I stood by you through the worst of your illness. I deserve some understanding too." I deleted all the messages without responding and drove back to Cedar Park to collect more of my belongings. Lisa's car was gone, which meant she was either at work or staying with Mark. I hoped it was the latter because facing her again felt impossible. The house felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of what had happened within its walls. Every room held new meaning. The kitchen, where she'd prepared special meals for my sensitive stomach while texting Mark about meeting later. Living room, where we'd watched movies during my recovery while she planned her next betrayal. The bedroom where we'd made love just days after I'd discovered their affair, with me completely unaware that she was comparing my cancer-weakened body to his healthy one. I packed, methodically, taking clothes, electronics, and personal items, while leaving behind anything that felt too connected to our shared life. The photo albums, the wedding gifts, the furniture we'd picked out together, all of it felt poisoned now. As I loaded boxes into my car, Mrs. Henderson from next door approached with a concerned expression. She was an elderly widow who'd been bringing me homemade soup throughout my treatment. "David, honey, is everything all right?" I saw Lisa leaving. "With suitcases yesterday, and you look upset." I wasn't ready to discuss the situation with neighbors, so I gave her a vague explanation about needing some space to focus on my recovery. She nodded sympathetically and offered to continue bringing meals, which almost made me cry. The kindness of a virtual stranger felt overwhelming after experiencing such cruelty from my closest relationships. Back at Tom's apartment, I finally called the number James Park had given me for legal consultations. Angela Martinez was a family law attorney who specialized in high-asset divorces and complex financial situations. Her assistant scheduled an emergency consultation for the following day. That evening, Tom and I sat in his kitchen working through the practical implications of divorce during cancer treatment. The medical debt, the mortgage, the shared credit cards, the retirement accounts, everything would need to be divided or assigned. The complexity felt overwhelming, especially when combined with ongoing chemotherapy fog that made concentrating difficult. The worst part, I told Tom, is that I trusted her completely. Even when things felt off, I kept making excuses, because I couldn't imagine she'd do something like this while I was fighting for my life. "That's what makes it so sick," Tom replied. "She used your illness as cover. You were vulnerable and dependent, and instead of protecting that trust, she exploited it." My phone buzzed with another message from Lisa. This time she was asking about logistics. When would I be moving out permanently? What did I want to do about the joint checking account? Could we at least discuss things like adults? The casualness of her tone infuriated me. She was treating our marriage like a business partnership that had simply run its course, not acknowledging the profound betrayal and emotional devastation she'd caused. There was no recognition that her actions had compounded the trauma of cancer treatment or that her timing had been particularly cruel. I turned off my phone and tried to focus on tomorrow's meeting with Angela Martinez. Something told me that legal strategy was going to become very important very quickly. Angela Martinez's office occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown Austin high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Lady Bird Lake. She was a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair and The kind of confident demeanor that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of human betrayal. When I walked into her conference room carrying a manila folder stuffed with medical bills and bank statements, she gestured for me to sit across from her polished mahogany desk. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a legal pad. "Oh, don't. Leave out details you think might be embarrassing or irrelevant. In divorce cases involving infidelity and significant debt, context matters more than you might expect." I walked her through the timeline, starting with my diagnosis and ending with the discovery of the affair. She took notes without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification about dates or financial specifics. When I mentioned the medical debt totaling over $300,000, she looked up from her notepad. "That's substantial, but manageable within the right legal framework," she said. "Texas is a community property state, which means debts incurred during marriage are typically split equally between spouses. However, there are exceptions and strategies we can explore." "What kind of strategies?" Angela leaned back in her chair, studying the documents I'd brought. "The affair complicates things in our favor. While Texas is a no-fault divorce state, adultery can still influence property division, especially when it involves breach of fiduciary duty or dissipation of marital assets. We can prove Lisa spent community funds on the affair that could impact how debt gets allocated. Community funds? Money from joint accounts used for hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for the affair partner, anything that benefited the relationship outside your marriage. Do you have access to credit card statements and bank records?" I nodded, thinking about the financial documents Lisa had been managing throughout my treatment. She handled most of our finances while I was sick. I trusted her to keep everything organized. That trust might work in our favor. As your spouse, she had a fiduciary duty to manage marital assets responsibly. Using those assets to fund an extramarital relationship could constitute a breach of that duty. Angela explained the legal concept while pulling up case files on her computer. Essentially, if Lisa had spent their money to support her relationship with Mark, those expenditures could be considered a dissipation of marital assets. In some cases, courts ordered the guilty spouse to compensate for those losses, either through a larger share of debt assumption or reduced asset distribution. "There's something else to consider," Angela continued. "Your medical condition creates additional complexity. Courts generally don't look favorably on spouses who abandon their partners during serious illness. The timing and circumstances of Lisa's affair could influence judicial discretion in asset and debt division. So there's a chance I could avoid taking on all this medical debt. More than a chance if we build the case correctly. But I need complete financial records going back at least a year. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, insurance policies, everything. Can you access those records?" I explained that most of our financial documents were stored digitally in accounts Lisa managed, along with physical files. Kept in our home office, getting access would require either her cooperation or legal intervention. "Let's start with a formal discovery request," Angela suggested. "We'll demand complete financial disclosure as part of the divorce proceedings. If she refuses or tries to hide assets, that works in our favor too." The consultation lasted 2 hours, covering everything from temporary spousal support to child custody, though the latter didn't apply to our situation. Angela's fees were substantial, but she offered a payment plan that would work with my limited income during treatment. Tom had agreed to help with the retainer, and I had some savings in individual accounts that Lisa couldn't access. "One more thing," Angela said as I prepared to leave. "Document everything from this point forward. Every interaction with Lisa, every text message, every phone call. If she tries to manipulate you or use your illness to gain advantage in negotiations, I want records of those attempts." Driving back to Tom's apartment, I felt something resembling hope for the first time in days. The legal strategy gave me a sense of control over a situation that had felt entirely chaotic. Instead of being a passive victim of Lisa's betrayal, I could actively fight back using the same legal system that would divide our assets and debts. That afternoon, I received a call from James Park, the financial advisor who'd been helping us manage medical expenses. Lisa had contacted him, It's asking about transferring certain accounts and changing beneficiary information on insurance policies. I told her I couldn't make any changes without both spouses present, James explained. But David, she seemed very anxious about the financial situation. She kept asking about your life insurance policy and whether medical debt would transfer to survivors if something happened to you. The implications of her questions chilled me. Lisa was either planning for my death or trying to understand how to protect herself financially if our marriage ended. Neither possibility reflected well on her character or motivations. I'm filing for divorce, I told James. Can you freeze any joint accounts or prevent her from making changes without my consent? I can put holds on certain actions, but you'll need legal documentation to make it official. Have your attorney contact my office with the appropriate paperwork. I called Angela immediately, and she promised to file emergency motions to prevent asset dissipation while divorce proceedings moved forward. The legal machinery was starting to turn, creating protective barriers around the few resources I had left. That evening, Lisa finally tracked me down at Tom's apartment. She appeared at the door around 8 p.m., looking haggard and desperate. Tom answered the buzzer and reluctantly let her come up, though he positioned himself protectively between us when she entered the living room. We need to talk, she said, ignoring Tom's presence. This whole situation is getting out of hand. I think adultery during cancer treatment got out of hand. I replied from the couch where I was resting after that day's chemotherapy session. Everything else is just consequences. Don't be dramatic. Yes, I made mistakes, but throwing away our entire marriage over a few months of poor judgment is insane. Think about everything we've built together. The phrase poor judgment struck me as particularly offensive. Poor judgment was forgetting to pay a bill or buying an expensive item without discussion. Sustained deception and betrayal during your spouse's life-threatening illness constituted something far more serious. What exactly did we build together, Lisa? A house with a massive mortgage that I'll probably lose? Medical debt that will take decades to pay off? A marriage based on lies? I stood by you through the worst of your illness. I drove you to appointments, managed your medications, dealt with insurance companies. That has to count for something. Tom stepped forward, his engineering-trained mind cutting through her emotional manipulation. He stood by him while sleeping with his best friend. That's not devotion, that's fraud. Lisa turned on him with surprising venom. This is between David and me. You've never liked me anyway, so your opinion doesn't matter. My opinion matters because I'm the one who held my brother while he cried about your betrayal, Tom shot back. I'm the one who listened to him blame himself for not being a good enough husband during chemotherapy. So yeah, my opinion absolutely matters. I watched this exchange with a detached fascination, seeing Lisa's true character emerge under pressure. The caring, supportive wife facade was cracking, revealing someone far more selfish and manipulative underneath. I want half the house, she said, shifting tactics to pure negotiation. And I'm not taking on medical debt that was incurred for your treatment. That's your responsibility. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted to profit from our shared assets while avoiding any responsibility for debts incurred during her period of supposed caregiving. Angela had warned me that Lisa might attempt this approach, positioning herself as an innocent party who deserved protection from her husband's medical expenses. That's not how community property works in Texas, I said calmly. It's definitely not how it works when one spouse commits adultery and breaches fiduciary duty by spending marital assets on an affair. Lisa's expression shifted to confusion, then alarm. What are you talking about? I never spent our money on Mark. Hotel rooms? Dinners? That weekend trip to San Antonio you told me was for work? I have credit card records, Lisa. Angela's already reviewing them. The color drained from her face as she realized the financial implications of her affair. Every romantic dinner, every hotel stay, every gift exchanged with Mark had been funded through joint accounts that legally belonged to both of us. Under Texas law, those expenditures could be classified as dissipation of marital assets. You can't prove I used our money for personal expenses, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can. Your credit card statements show charges at restaurants on nights you told me you were working late, hotel bookings during times you claimed to be visiting your sister, Angela specializes in tracking this kind of financial deception. Lisa began pacing around Tom's small living room, her composure completely shattered. This is insane. You're trying to destroy me financially over relationship problems that we could work through in counseling. Relationship problems? I stood up slowly, my energy depleted, but my anger providing temporary strength. You didn't have relationship problems with me, Lisa. You had a relationship with Mark while pretending to have one with me. There's a difference. I never stopped loving you. You stopped respecting me the moment you decided my cancer was inconvenient enough to justify sleeping with my best friend, I told her. She pivoted to the angle I knew was coming. You're sick, David. The chemo's messing with your judgment. You're not thinking clearly about what a divorce would mean. What happens if you relapse? Who's going to take care of you then? It was a thinly veiled threat, emotional manipulation masked as concern. She was implying that my illness made me dependent on her, that leaving her could jeopardize my health. That moment solidified what I had long suspected. Her calculated control had been present throughout our entire marriage. I'd rather battle cancer alone than stay with someone who betrayed me while I was fighting for my life, I said. At least cancer doesn't pretend not to be deadly. Lisa left that night, empty-handed. Tom locked the door behind her, visibly disgusted. I've never seen anyone weaponize someone's illness during a breakup. That woman's dangerous. He wasn't wrong. But beneath my anger, a new feeling stirred relief. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt hopeful about the future. I had a solid legal team, undeniable evidence, and people who genuinely cared. Lisa had misjudged me, assuming illness made me weak. What she didn't understand was that cancer had taught me how to fight for my life, and now for my freedom. Then came the financial revelations. Angela's forensic accountant, Patricia Coleman, spent weeks combing through our accounts. What she uncovered shifted the entire case from simple infidelity to near fraud. Your wife got creative with marital funds, Patricia said, spreading documents across Angela's desk like a crime scene. The affair expenses were only the beginning. Lisa had been quietly siphoning money from our shared accounts while I was undergoing treatment, moving small amounts under $1,000 at a time to avoid detection. In total, she moved $47,000 to a hidden savings account she opened just 3 days after my diagnosis. Angela cross-checked the timeline with my medical records. She was literally stealing from you while driving you to chemo. This is next-level manipulation. The spending stung. Luxury handbags bought on days I could barely stand. Lavish. Dinners on nights she claimed to be working late. A weekend spa retreat during my worst hospitalization one she took with her sister Rebecca, who turned out to be complicit in her lies. Even worse. Lisa had used our joint credit to bankroll Mark's budding fitness business, paying for his certifications, equipment, and startup costs. Nearly $12,000 of our shared debt had gone to support her affair partner's future. Estimates she diverted at least $78,000 of marital assets, Patricia concluded. Angela's eyes lit up. In Texas, that kind of dissipation can result in double the amount being assigned back to the guilty party. Lisa could end up solely responsible for over $150,000 in debt. That meant Lisa could be left with the majority of our $300,000 in medical expenses. And with the documentation of her misconduct, I had a real chance of keeping the house too. The legal team built an airtight case. Even Lisa's lawyer, Richard Hayes, encouraged her to settle rather than go to trial. At our first settlement conference, Lisa looked diminished, smaller, defensive, even as she wore designer clothes that reeked of Mark's influence. We're offering a 50-50th split of debts and assets, Hayes said, pushing a folder toward Angela. She didn't even open it. Your client drained marital funds, committed adultery during her husband's cancer, and funneled community money into her lover's business. 50-50 isn't on the table. Hayes argued that the spending was standard under stress. Lisa, meanwhile, avoided eye contact. Lisa, I said calmly, do you really believe that buying luxury purses while I was hooked up to IVS counts as normal spending? She sighed, her tone both dismissive and defensive. David, you have no idea what I went through. Fear, the pressure. I needed outlets to cope. So you coped with cheating and stealing? I did what I had to do to survive. There was no remorse. In her eyes, she was a victim of circumstance, justified in every betrayal because of my illness. But in that moment, I saw the truth. Lisa hadn't just betrayed me. She'd revealed who she really was, and I was done letting her rewrite that story. There was no recognition that her actions had caused additional trauma during an already traumatic time. No acknowledgement that her betrayal had compounded my suffering. Angela pulled out the financial evidence, spreading it across the conference table like a poker player revealing a winning hand. These documents show systematic diversion of marital funds for personal benefit. The pattern suggests premeditation, not stress-induced poor judgment. Hayes studied the paperwork with growing concern, occasionally whispering to Lisa as he reviewed the more damaging evidence. Her face grew paler as Angela walked through each category of financial misconduct, connecting specific purchases to dates when I'd been hospitalized or receiving treatment. The spa weekend is particularly interesting, Angela noted. Mrs. Chen charged $1,500 for a luxury retreat. During the same week, her husband was admitted to the ICU for complications from chemotherapy. The resort confirmation shows she upgraded to their premium package, which includes couples massage therapy. I needed stress relief, Lisa said weakly. While your husband was in intensive care fighting for his life, I couldn't help him. By sitting in a hospital room 24 hours a day, the settlement conference ended without resolution. Hayes requested additional time to review the evidence and consult with his client about revised terms. As we gathered our documents, Lisa approached me with tears in her eyes. David, please don't do this. We can work through our problems if you'll just give me a chance. I know I made mistakes, but I was scared and overwhelmed. The affair meant nothing compared to our marriage. If it meant nothing, why did you spend our money building Mark's business? It wasn't about him. I was trying to diversify our income streams in case your illness affected your ability to work long term. Even in desperation, she couldn't stop lying. The fitness business investments had been clearly labeled on credit card statements, with charges for specialized equipment and marketing materials that had nothing to do with our financial security. I'm done, Lisa. You made your choices during the worst period of my life. Now I'm making mine. She grabbed my arm as I turned to leave, her grip surprisingly strong. You don't understand what you're giving up. I took care of you when no one else would. I was there through everything. You were there physically while being emotionally and financially invested in someone else. That's not taking care of me. That's performing a role while planning your exit strategy. Angela intervened before the conversation could escalate. Further, guiding me toward the elevator while Lisa remained in the conference room with her attorney. On the drive back to her office, Angela seemed optimistic about our prospects. They're going to settle, she predicted. The evidence is too damaging for trial, and Hayes knows it. Lisa's going to end up with most of the medical debt, and you'll likely keep the house. What about Mark? Does he face any consequences? Civil court doesn't handle adultery as a criminal matter, but there might be other options. If his fitness business was funded with your money, you could potentially have a claim against those assets. The possibility of recovering some of the money Lisa had stolen to fund Mark's career was appealing, but I was more interested in the symbolic justice. They'd used my cancer as an opportunity to build their future together. Having that future, complicated by legal consequences, seemed appropriate. That evening, I received a call from Dr. Williams with news about my latest test results. The cancer was in remission, and if the trend continued, I'd be finished with active treatment within 6 weeks. The timing felt significant, as if my body was recovering just as my life was finally stabilizing. You've been through more than most people could handle, Dr. Williams said. The combination of cancer treatment and major life stress, typically, has negative health impacts, but your recovery has been remarkable. I thought about her comment as I hung up. The divorce proceedings had actually been therapeutic in an unexpected way. Fighting back against Lisa's betrayal had given me a sense of control and purpose that complemented the medical battle against cancer. Instead of being overwhelmed by multiple crises, I'd found strength in addressing them simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mark. We need to talk. Meet me at Cedar Park tomorrow at noon. Come alone. The message felt like the final piece of a puzzle, clicking into place. After months of hiding behind Lisa and avoiding direct confrontation, Mark was finally ready to face the consequences of his actions. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Angela before responding with a simple, "See you there, Zilker." Park was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. With only a few joggers and dog walkers scattered across the vast green space, I arrived early and positioned myself on a bench near the Austin City Limits Music Festival stage, giving me clear sight lines in all directions. Angela had insisted I wear a recording device, and Tom waited in his car at the parking lot entrance. As backup, Mark appeared exactly at noon, walking slowly across the grass with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. He looked terrible, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. The confident personal trainer persona had been replaced by nervous energy and darting glances, as if he expected cameras or police officers to emerge from behind trees. "Thanks for coming," he said, settling onto the opposite end of the bench. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. What could you possibly have to say that would interest me?" He stared at the ground for a long moment before speaking. "Lisa told me about the divorce papers, about the debt allocation. David, I had no idea she was using your money for my business stuff. She said it came from her personal savings. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. Credit card statements clearly showed charges to accounts in both our names, and Mark had been present during several of the purchasing transactions. But his attempt at plausible deniability suggested he was more concerned about potential legal consequences than moral accountability. You really expect me to believe you thought? Lisa had $40,000 in personal savings while her husband was accumulating massive medical debt. I knew you guys were struggling financially. That's why I felt so bad about Lisa having to deal with everything alone while you were sick. She seemed like she needed support. So you decided to sleep with her." Mark's face flushed red, and he shifted uncomfortably on the bench. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We were just friends at first, and she was going through such a hard time with your illness. One thing led to another. One thing led to another for 6 months? While I was getting chemotherapy? I know how it looks, but neither of us planned for it to develop into anything serious. We tried to stop several times, but Lisa was so lonely and scared. The narrative he was constructing painted him as a reluctant participant in Lisa's seduction, someone who'd been pulled into an affair by her emotional neediness rather than his own selfish desires. It was a convenient story that minimized his agency while positioning Lisa as the primary instigator. "Why are you telling me this, Mark? What do you want?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message from Lisa sent that morning. "She's blaming everything on me now. Says I manipulated her during a vulnerable time and took advantage of her emotional state. She's threatening to testify that I coerced her into the affair." The message was brutal in its calculation, throwing Mark completely under the bus too. Minimize Lisa's own legal exposure. She was prepared to paint herself as a victim of his manipulation rather than an equal participant in their betrayal. "Sounds like you're learning what kind of person Lisa really is," I said. "Unfortunately, I learned it 6 months too late. David, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I genuinely never meant for this to hurt you." Lisa made it sound like your marriage was already over, like you guys were basically separated because of your illness. Did she also tell you that my marriage was over when she was holding my hand during chemotherapy sessions? Mark had no answer for that question. The cognitive dissonance of their affair required such elaborate mental gymnastics that confronting the basic timeline made their justifications collapse. "I want to make this right," he said finally. "Tell me what I can do." "You can start by paying back the $12,000 Lisa stole from us to fund your business." "I don't have that kind of money. The gym isn't profitable yet, and most of the equipment is financed." "Then you can liquidate the business and return whatever money you can recover. Consider it a lesson in not building your career on stolen funds." Mark's expression shifted from remorse to defensiveness. "That's not fair. I didn't know the money was stolen, and shutting down the business would destroy months of work. I mean, months of work funded by a cancer patient's medical debt. That should be destroyed. Lisa said you had good insurance in that. The medical bills weren't as bad as you made them seem." The depth of Lisa's deception was staggering. She'd apparently convinced Mark that our financial crisis was exaggerated, possibly to make her theft seem less significant or to justify her spending on their relationship. Mark, I'm $300,000 in debt from cancer treatment. Lisa knew that, participated in meetings with financial advisors about it, and helped set up payment plans with medical providers. There's no universe where she didn't understand the severity of our situation. 300,000. His face went pale. She told me it was maybe 50,000 after insurance. She lied to you about everything, just like she lied to me. The difference is that I was her husband fighting cancer while she betrayed me. You were just her affair partner who happened to benefit financially from her theft. Mark stood up, abruptly pacing back and forth in front of the bench. This is insane. She's destroyed both of our lives. She destroyed my life. You helped her do it, and you profited from it. Those aren't equivalent situations. What happens now? You going to sue me too? It depends on whether you cooperate with the divorce proceedings. If you're willing to testify about Lisa's financial deceptions and return what money you can, we might be able to work something out. Mark pulled out his phone again, scrolling through what appeared to be months of text messages. I have everything documented. All the conversations about money, the business planning, her complaints about your marriage. She's been lying to both of us. Send copies to my attorney. And Mark, next time someone tells you their spouse is dying of cancer, but they're available for an affair, maybe consider that they might not be the most reliable narrator. I left him sitting on the bench, staring at his phone with an expression of complete devastation. Tom was waiting in the parking lot with coffee and a satisfied grin. How did it go? Better than expected. He's going to cooperate with Angela, and it sounds like he has documentation that will make Lisa's position even worse. 3 weeks later, Lisa agreed to a settlement that exceeded our most optimistic projections. She accepted responsibility for $220,000 in medical debt, while I kept the house and assumed the remaining $80,000. Mark liquidated his gym equipment and returned $8,000 as partial restitution. The final divorce hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. Lisa sat with her attorney looking defeated and bitter, occasionally glaring at me as if her financial consequences were somehow unfair. When the judge asked if she understood the terms of the settlement, she answered with barely concealed resentment. I understand that I'm being punished for making emotional mistakes during the most difficult period of my life. You're being held accountable for financial fraud and adultery, the judge corrected. The court finds the settlement terms appropriate, given the documented evidence of misconduct. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: genuine optimism about my future. The cancer was in remission, the medical debt was manageable, and I owned my home free and clear. Most importantly, I was surrounded by people who actually cared about my well-being. Dr. Williams had been right about stress affecting recovery. Once the divorce was finalized and Lisa was out of my life, my energy levels improved dramatically. 6 months later, I was back to full-time work and had started dating someone who thought my cancer survival story was inspiring rather than inconvenient. Lisa moved in with her sister Rebecca, and last I heard, she was working at a different country club across town. Mark closed his fitness business and moved back to Houston to live with his parents. Their relationship apparently didn't survive the legal and financial consequences of their choices. Sometimes I wonder if they ever discussed the irony of their situation. They destroyed a marriage and stole money to build a future together, only to discover that relationships built on betrayal tend to collapse under pressure. The foundation they'd created was too rotten to support anything lasting. The medical debt Lisa assumed eventually went into default, damaging her credit for years. The house I kept appreciated significantly as Austin's tech market boomed. Just as it turned out, had a sense of poetry. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.